Yolo, Yuba, and Sutter counties. This work is funded by a grant from the California Public Utilities Commission and carried out in partnership with California Emerging Technology Fund, who's partnering with us today. We're also advancing strategies and research to identify gaps in broadband deployment, identify regional broadband strategic priorities, and local assets to address these gaps. This work is also done in partnership with those on this call, including CETF. And to kind of address these broad-based pillars that we've identified, we're building partnerships across our region. So Valley Vision manages the Sacramento Coalition for Digital Inclusion in partnership with our 4 regional workforce boards, the City of Sacramento, Los Rios Community College District, Sacramento Public Library, Sac State, and many others. This broad-based coalition addresses broadband infrastructure access issues, technology access, as well as digital skills. So that brings us to why we're here today. I'm really proud to be here with our key partners. We have a long history of partnering with both California Forward and California Emerging Technology Fund. Both CETF and California Forward are statewide leaders advocating for broadband access and supporting regional efforts like ours to advance research and action to support broadband for those who need it most. This is, like I said, a really critical time, and not just this year during the pandemic, but actually this month and even this day. I think right now as we speak, the state is considering where to invest for critical state needs, and broadband clearly is a key priority. We've all been working hard to make our voices heard and to advocate for the needs that we have for state investments. And we feel like we've made a lot of progress. And I know that we're hopefully awaiting some announcements today about what's going on with the state budget. So there might be some progress on that, or there might be news about that just this morning. But in the meantime, I'm happy to turn it over to our next key partner, and that's Michael Weinberg.
Awesome. Thanks, Evan. Good to see you again. So excited to partner with you on this and all the work that we do through the California Stewardship Network. So yeah, I'm Micah. I run California Forward, and we're a movement to make California's economy and government work for everyone. And we really anchor our work in the evidence. We have a California Dream Index where we measure how people are doing across a range of different factors: housing affordability, access to clean water, but also broadband. And as we all know, access to broadband is unequal by region, by race, ethnicity, by income and education. And those disparities get worse and worse the higher the speeds are. So what do we do about it? Well, we really root ourselves in communities. Instead of just thinking about how to operate within the sort of Sacramento interest group politics, we understand if we want different outcomes, we need to build different coalitions. Otherwise, we're going to get the same outcomes that we've been getting. And so, Evan and Valley Vision and so many other organizations across the state are a part of this growing coalition committed to inclusive and sustainable economic growth. And then we bring all that together through the California Economic Summit, where the different regions advance innovative ideas, build coalitions, implement policies. And so for several years, we've had a Broadband for All working group at the California Economic Summit. And it has been led by some fantastic folks, including Eduardo Gonzalez from CSU Fresno, Jason Schwenkler from CSU Chico, and importantly, a couple of our friends that we're doing this webinar with today. So Trish Kelly from Valley Vision, and our fearless leader, Sunny Wright McPeak, of the California Emerging Technology Fund, who really has been instrumental in making this a major priority for the state, which we just really can't take for granted. So quickly, we advocate for really an all of the above strategy in broadband access. So, continuation of the CASIF funding, putting in place a bond, regulatory reform, importantly, private investment. This isn't about should we do this with private industry or public investment. We really need both if we're going to deal with both the unserved and the underserved in California. And hopefully, fingers crossed, it's an interesting time to be doing this webinar, a major public investment in infrastructure. And we've advocated in particular for open access middle mile network, but also last mile solutions and access solutions and affordability are essential. And, I'll just conclude by saying we really need resilience. So, having just one network, just one way of accessing for individuals, which a lot of people don't even have one. But if we're going to be resilient to fires and everything else, we need, redundant infrastructure here. We need internet at the speed of business. We focus a lot on households, but if we're going to have true regional economic equity, we need to have broadband speeds that work for people in small businesses trying to adapt to e-commerce. We need broadband that works for telemedicine. We really do need those higher speeds. And then finally, we need solutions that are tailored to the distinct communities. Downtown Los Angeles is very different than the Eastern Sierra. And so one of the big reasons we advocate for all of the above strategy is because we need lots of different strategies to work for lots of different communities. So delighted to be here today and really happy to be hosting this with Valley Vision and CETF.
And thank you, Micah. I want to say to you, Micah, and to Evan, amen. Everything you just said is so right on and resonates with the California Emerging Technology Fund. You've all both said exactly why we're here and what the imperative is. And with all of the above strategy, as Micah said, and the partnership that Evan underscored, we also need everyone at the table. This webinar today is fortuitous in its timing. As we are gathering, Governor Newsom is going to be unveiling the budget May revision, called the May Revise, that we are hopeful has significant investment by the state in broadband. That will be a great jumpstart to California investing and being in line as one of the first states to get our fair share of federal dollars. But that also will necessitate all of us in each of the communities working together, and community by community working as a region to coalesce our efforts around public and private investment in high-speed internet networks. The purpose of today's webinar is to focus on the resource guide for local and regional government leaders to be able to accelerate broadband deployment and adoption. So it's a toolkit that you're going to hear more about, and we're also going to profile extraordinary leaders at the local and regional levels of government to be those partners to the state, to be those partners to the federal government, and to partner with the private sector in each community, each region, and throughout California. I am joined today as part of the California Emerging Technology Fund leadership by our Treasurer, CFO, Director, Rich Mata, and our colleague, Vice President Gladys Papalatic, who has actually been point on the resource guide. Just to put this in perspective, more than a decade ago, CETF partnered with the Orange County Business Council and the Center for a New Orange County to develop the first resource guide. That was done in consultation with the California State Association of Counties, the League of California Cities, the regional counties, representatives of California, RCRC, all of the planning organizations throughout the state, and all of the internet service providers. We also had the California Association of the Council of Governments. That resource guide at that time drew upon the models, the examples from local government throughout California. This resource guide that has been released and will be featured today has been updated by Valley Vision. Again, going to all of the partners, gathering all of the examples throughout California so that you have ready-made for your county, for your city, the tools to accelerate broadband deployment and adoption with policies, with ordinances, with strategies for action that will allow you to step up and accelerate getting everyone in your community connected. We are just absolutely delighted that we get to also kick this off with some new data. The California Emerging Technology Fund since 2008 has sponsored the statewide survey on broadband adoption. We've always had an independent research partner who's actually managed and overseen the research, although we have sponsored it. In 2021, we have struck a new partnership with the University of Southern California with the support from the top level from Vice President Sam Garrison and USC President Fall, who has said, we are going to be the institution who provides data for policy making in California. We have had the extraordinary collaboration among several schools at USC and a research team at the Annenberg School that has done yeoman's work in a short period of time to gather the data that you're now going to hear. That work has been led by Dr. Hernan Galperin with the support of Dr. Francois Barr. Francois has been a member of the CETF Board of Expert Advisors from our very beginning, going back to 2007. Hernan has been a researcher with USC on broadband since he joined the university and has been on our Board of Expert Advisors. And he has been supported by a doctoral student, Ty Lee, that I just also want to do a shout out to too. So it is my real pleasure to be able to turn this over now to Dr. Hernan Galperin from the University of Southern California Annenberg School to share with you the results of the 2021 statewide survey. I want to add, please think in terms of not only the data about adoption, but information about trip generation and the planning that can go on in each community in California to actually optimize broadband as a green strategy. So it's my pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Hernan Galperin.
Thank you, Sunny, for the introduction. Again, my name is Hernan Galperin. I'm an associate professor at the USC Annenberg School, and I'm the principal investigator for this study, the statewide survey on broadband adoption, which, as Sunny mentioned, is part of a broader research partnership between CETF and USC and involves many colleagues and students from different schools. So what I'll be presenting today is really a product of a team effort, and we're grateful to CETF for supporting this work and promoting this collaboration. And the survey is really one component of this broader research collaboration, but it's a really critical component because the survey is a core diagnostic tool that allows us to understand where California stands in terms of broadband adoption and what needs to be done, what are the levers to be pushed to close the digital divide. And the survey is unique in many ways, but one of the ways I want to highlight is that we do the survey in a, what I would call the old-fashioned way, which is through telephone calls, because most surveys today are done online, they're online panels, but that defeats the purpose of the survey, which is one of the main goals is to precisely understand who is connected, who's not connected, and who's what we call underconnected. What are the underconnected? The underconnected are those that only have a connection through a smartphone, a wireless hotspot. And I think if there's something that the pandemic has shown is that is just not enough. To be connected through a smartphone or a wireless hotspot is just not enough when you have several family members connecting and one is doing schoolwork, the other is trying to do some a meeting online. Being connected through a smartphone is just not enough. That's what we call them underconnected. And second, as Sunny mentioned, this survey has been implemented since 2008. So that allows us to understand progress, to track progress over time in terms of connectivity and different key demographic groups to be connected. So let me begin by showing some of the main results in terms of the progress that has been made since 2008. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? I believe everybody can see my screen. Okay, so these are sort of the core results from the survey in terms of the share of the population in California that is overall connected, that is the black line, dark line is overall connected. And in 2021, California reached a key milestone, which is overall connectivity has, for the first time, is above 90%. That is an important milestone that the state reached in 2021. But perhaps even more important is that the share of those who are underconnected, smartphone only, has been diminishing and is now today only about 6%, which is about half of what it was in the previous survey in 2019. So the blue line is those connected through a desktop, laptop, or tablet. So the difference between the black line and the blue line are the underconnected. As you can see, the underconnected has been it's smaller and smaller, and it's about, again, half in 2021 of what it was in 2019. So that's great. That's great progress in overall connectivity and also in reducing those that are underconnected. However, as Sunny mentioned, as others mentioned before, this progress is not widely shared. So let me take you through a few slides that show how this progress is still not widely shared by everyone. Perhaps the most obvious one is that we have still large differences by race or ethnicity, and highlighting here the largest minority population, obviously Hispanics, who still are behind the other racial and ethnic groups. You can see, for example, Hispanics, in particular those that are Spanish speaking, are about 5 times more likely to be unconnected, about twice as likely to be underconnected. So compared to white non-Hispanics, for example. So still very much lagging in terms of connectivity for this group. We also document differences in terms of income. Here we are showing simply the difference between those who are low income. This is a threshold that is often used, that is low income being at or low or below the 200% of the federal poverty line. So those who are low income by this threshold are significantly less connected. You can see they're about twice as likely to be unconnected compared to the general population, and also twice as likely to be underconnected. So we know that income and affordability, as I'm going to show you in a few slides, is a key driver or a key barrier to connectivity. We also break our results by age group, and this is perhaps not surprising that those who are the older adults, 65 and older, are less connected than the general population, and of course than the younger age groups. Somewhat to be expected, we knew that, but actually when we look over time, so if you look over time, the 65 and older, this is the green line, they are actually the group that has made the most progress over time, and really significant progress since 2019. We believe there's a lot here having to do with the pandemic. This is the group that was most at risk and in terms of health risk with COVID. So this really brought this population online. So even though they're still behind the other groups, they really made significant progress. And as I'm going to discuss in a minute, that really is an opportunity to increase the kind of services that are targeted for this older adult group by the fact that now they are more connected than ever. And last one that I want to highlight some of the differences is differences by region. So here we break down the results through about 6 regions. We break down this result, and you can see some differences. Particularly notable are Central Valley behind the state totals, and Los Angeles County. So you have a combination here of both population density and infrastructure deployment issues, particularly in Central Valley, but in LA County is mostly about poverty and income. So it's a combination of these factors that's driving the differences here between the California regions. Now, we ask people why those who are not connected, or the ones that are underconnected, those who have no internet at home or that only have a smartphone. We ask them, well, why are you not fully connected? And we ask this in two ways. First, we ask, well, what are all the reasons? Tell us all the reasons you're not connected. And then we gather all these reasons. This is the results on the left. And you see that respondents say, well, it's too expensive. That's at the top. But they also say, I have privacy concerns, security concerns, not comfortable using the PC, don't have the equipment, and so forth. So there's clearly, this is a complex issue. There's clearly multidimensional reasons why people are not connected. But then we ask, okay, but from all these reasons that you mentioned, what is the really critical one, the main reason you're not connected? And this is where we see that the key reason is affordability. Clearly, when we move from all the reasons to the one that's really driving, the key barrier is affordability. And you can see the results clearly in this graph. Now, we know there are alternative, low-cost alternatives for those who are not connected. They've been around for some time. So we ask, well, are you aware of those low-cost plans that are available with different requirements and so forth? But we just generally ask, are you available of this opportunity for folks who are connected to buy internet at a low cost? And as you can see here, awareness is pretty low. About 2/3 of our those who are not connected or underconnected don't know about this plan. So only 1/3 know about these plans, and even less apply. Even those who are aware of them, only about 1/4, however, have ever applied to those plans. So there's a combination here why people are not taking advantage of these plans. The combination of lack of information, lack of awareness, but also not really understanding how to apply, who qualifies. There's some language barriers. There's a host of reasons why people are really not taking advantage of these opportunities. And the last two slides I want to show you are slides where Sunny mentioned that we ask about what are people doing with broadband, particularly at this very unique time in the pandemic. This field was done in March, so we asked people, well, over the last year, for example, how much did you work at home versus in person? So the total, as you see in the top bar, about 1/3 of our sample work fully online, and then others work part online, and a few never work online. But then we asked, if you were given the opportunity, would you want to keep working online? And as you can see, most people really want to take advantage of this opportunity. They want to keep working at least either fully online or 1 or 2 days, maybe 3 or 4 days online. So there's really a really critical opportunity for broadband to be able to, through telework, reduce greenhouse emissions, reduce carbon emissions, and make transportation systems better for California. And last slide is on telehealth. We asked people, have you ever used telehealth in the last year? And as you can see here, telehealth, which was always on the margin of health services, really took a center stage, and particularly in the older adults, 65 and older, 2/3 of them said, yes, I've had a consultation with my doctor through either a phone, smartphone, or a computer. So it's not ideal. We would like more people to take advantage of this on computers, but still, this is evidence of a great opportunity to expand health services through telehealth if everybody would be connected, which again is still not the case. So again, I just give you a glimpse of some of the findings. The results are all available in the CTF webpage as well as the USC webpage. And I think I don't know if we have some time for questions, but I'll leave just this slide with some of the details of the survey and take any questions.
So the question that has come in from Sean Klein Hernan is, what about usage by undocumented status? And I think it may be worth talking about just the methodology again and why we use this in order to get to everybody.
Right, that's a good question. We did not ask for immigration status. This is obviously a very sensitive question. So presumably they are in our sample. We did not ask for that. What we did this time, which was I think was an interesting twist, we made a very concerted effort to reach prepaid cell phones, which we know are very much used by undocumented immigrants for quite obvious reasons. So in our sample, we had a good number, I forget exact number, but we have a good number of prepaid, not just general cell phones, but a sample of prepaid cell phones. I think it's also an interesting question because we know that some of that relates to those who are not signing up for low-cost offers because that requires documentation that they may be afraid to provide because they are undocumented immigrants. So I think it's a great question. Again, we know we captured them in the sample, but we did not ask because of the sensitivity of the question.
And as we just conclude this session on time, thank you, Hernan. I do want to underscore that we invest a lot in this methodology, the random digit dialing and the emphasis on the prepaid phones in order to get everyone in California. There's no list we can just go purchase. We do have, however, a subset of those who were selected scientifically randomly who have agreed to be part of a follow-up. And we're working on additional research that might allow us to probe further. And there's also really interesting data about essential workers and their patterns of use during the shelter in place and also obviously going forward. So as we do this transition to the next section, do take advantage of what Dr. Galperin has said. All the data is available on the USC website, on the CETF website, and there will be more analysis as we do crosstabs in order to share and also follow up research. I'm also stepping in because I do want to acknowledge before Issa speaks just the immense amount of work that Valley Vision did in accomplishing this resource guide update. You heard initially from Trish Kelly, who is the premier partner in any venture, be it with California Forward, with the California Stewardship Network, with the California Emerging Technology Fund, and also has been a leading voice among the Broadband Regional Consortia in California. And so we always value the fact that Trish is willing to go into the trenches no matter what, and has been a great advocate for what we think the governor is announcing as we speak here, which is a testimony to everybody's advocacy and evidence about the need to close the digital divide in California. And then Issa Avancentia has done an amazing job of being on point for the resource guide. And I just want to do that shout out for Issa as lead project manager on this for Valley Vision. And thank you both for being such great partners. As Micah has talked about the journey we've been on from the economic summit where Governor Newsom announced broadband for all through an action plan to this point in time today, it takes all of us working together. Thank you, Issa, and I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you so much, Sunny, and thank you, Dr. Galperin, for sharing all that really important data with us. Good morning again to everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us for this very important, very timely topic. Again, my name is Issa Avancenia. I am a project associate working at Valley Vision. And I'm going to be giving a little bit of an overview of the Getting Connected, a resource guide for local and regional government leaders. Can you move to the next slide, please? Thank you. As we're all very aware at this point, there is a really clear need for more investment in broadband, and we are seeing a lot of that coming down the pipeline. But going together with these investments, of course, are the policies and best practices that local governments can adopt and implement in order to secure these investments and ensure that they go a long way towards closing the digital divide. And this is where the resource guide comes in. So as Sunny mentioned earlier, this resource guide is an updated version of the original Getting Connected guide, which was written and released by the California Emerging Technology Fund in October of 2010. So quite a long time ago. And of course, a lot has changed in the broadband landscape since then. However, one thing that still holds true, one thing that is still the case is that local governments can have a really substantial impact on advancing broadband in their communities. So while it is true that certain issues have to be addressed at the federal or the state level, the various roles of local government leaders empower them to make incredible progress in getting broadband to residents, to businesses, schools, and other anchor institutions. These roles are all discussed in depth in the resource guide itself. What you're seeing right now in the slide in front of you is an abridged overview version of that. So we see here the roles of local and regional government as policy leaders, as planners, as regulators, as consumers, and as service providers. And I also want to emphasize that even if these roles aren't explicitly called out by name, they are embedded in the function of our local and regional governments. And these roles, again, can empower them to make really, really amazing strides in broadband deployment in their respective jurisdictions. Next slide, please. So a little bit on how to use this resource guide. This resource guide, ultimately, we always say that it is an excellent starting point for, again, jurisdictions that want to do more or take steps to advance broadband deployment, whether it's a city or a county. This resource guide includes a number of different really important pieces for that. So it includes an overview of different broadband plans and ordinances across the state. It includes a number of different case studies for broadband deployment and adoption, including, for example, municipal broadband or 5G deployment. And one feature that I really want to highlight especially is that the resource guide includes a list of what we call additional resources from national and state broadband agencies and organizations. So these include organizations such as Next Century Cities, NTIA, among many, many others. And of course, as we all know, the broadband landscape constantly evolving. There are constantly new innovations in technology and policy as well. So what this additional resource list in the guide does is that if you click on those additional resources and use those links to go to the different websites, it's a really good portal into keeping abreast with all the broadband developments, both in technology and in policy. Next slide, please. So a little bit about how this resource guide was put together, or the methodology behind it. So it was a process of several months of really intense data gathering and reaching out to different stakeholders and partners. So again, beginning with data gathering from several nationwide and statewide organizations that do research and disseminate information, including speaking with experts and stakeholders in the space. Last October, Valley Vision hosted what we called a Getting Connected Roundtable, which is really also really an important piece of this. This roundtable brought together several local government leaders and advocates for broadband, as well as several internet service providers. And we had a panel and a really rich discussion that helped inform some of the things you're going to be seeing in this guide. We also did a fair amount of outreach to consultants and outreach, of course, to our state's regional broadband consortia, who are charged with working with their jurisdictions on identifying and implementing broadband-friendly policies and practices. And of course, outreach to jurisdictions themselves, such as different cities and counties who are doing really, really important and amazing things to close the digital divide. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to move into talking a little bit about some of the main sections that we have in this guide, and I won't take too much time, and this guide will pop the link into the chat for everyone to look at the guide itself, and these slides will also be made available to you after this presentation, so you can all review them in your own time. So one section or one main section that we have in the broadband guide is on the broadband master plans. So broadband master plans are comprehensive plans that outline a jurisdiction's priorities and policies in the broadband space. You know, they often include things like an in-depth assessment of the community's current capability and accessibility, an asset inventory, different kinds of funding strategies, or different regulations with respect to leasing and permitting, among other really important topics. Broadband master plans either can be incorporated, sometimes they're incorporated into a jurisdiction's general plan, and sometimes they exist kind of as a separate document. Next slide, please. This is an example of the way this information is presented in the guide itself. I know the font is a little bit small, so apologies for that. But when you look at the guide, this is kind of what you'll see when you're talking about the broadband master plans. We've identified several really good examples from different jurisdictions, counties, and cities throughout the state of California. And we break it down and give you kind of a high level summary of what is contained in that plan. In the guide itself, you'll see here where it says broadband master plan, and you'll see in the guide itself that these titles are hyperlinked, so you can actually click on it in the guide and it'll take you to the text of the document itself, so you can use that as a reference. So here you're seeing a couple of examples. We have El Dorado County, and as you'll see in our agenda, we have some representatives from the county joining us later today to talk more in depth about this, which is really wonderful. They'll be able to share some really great insight on this topic. And then as you're seeing here, so for example, you have El Dorado County, who have their broadband feasibility study and funding strategies, and then you have another jurisdiction, Humboldt County, who have their broadband strategy incorporated into their general plan. So here, again, just an example of the way this appears in the guide. Next slide, please. Another really important piece of this is important section in the guide is on the dig once, dig smart policies, which encourage the placement of fiber or conduit in the ground anytime the road is dug up for a public works project. Again, the rationale behind these dig once, dig smart policies, sort of a two birds with one stone approach, making sure that you're really taking advantage of, again, anytime the road is dug up for a public works project, you're taking advantage of that and putting the necessary fiber and conduit in where applicable. Again, a dig once, dig smart policy can either be built into a master plan or exist separately for jurisdictions that already have master plans or telecommunications chapters in their general plans. It's easy enough to adopt a dig once, dig smart ordinance that already builds on that. Next slide, please. Again, an example here of how these dig once, dig smart ordinances are highlighted in the guide itself. You'll see it on a table with a summary of the ordinance, and then you'll be able to click directly to the text of the ordinance to see it in full. And here you're seeing in front of you an example from Calaveras and Tuolumne counties, who have both adopted this dig once, dig smart ordinance for their jurisdictions. Next slide, please. One other thing I'll point out before I forget, you'll always see on the left-hand side under the jurisdiction, we indicate always the population size and the number of households for that jurisdiction. And we find that this can be helpful for local and regional government leaders using these slides, because that can give some context as to the scale or the size of the jurisdiction that the policy is being implemented in. So leaders can figure out if it could also be appropriate for their own jurisdiction. So another important section we have, could you go back to the previous slide, please? Another important section we have is on municipal fiber to the premises, which is used in reference to telecommunications that use fiber to connect to the subscriber. Again, an example here we have, we're highlighting here the city of Santa Cruz. This particular example demonstrates kind of the need and benefits of entering into public-private partnerships to increase capacity and cut costs around this type of broadband deployment. Next slide, please. Finally, we have a section on master license agreements. which are essentially agreements made between the licensor, such as the jurisdiction, which is either the county or the city, and the licensee, who would be the internet service provider, infrastructure provider. And these master license agreements allow the licensee to use and make attachments to certain structures according to the terms in the agreement. And then the licensor in turn, or the jurisdiction in turn, commits to accommodating the licensee's use and attachment to the structures. Again, you'll see here we highlight a specific example from the city of Salinas. Next slide, please. And finally, I believe this is my last slide. So another really important feature of this resource guide is towards kind of the second half of the resource guide, we have a whole section on what we call additional models and case studies, where instead of it being broken down into the table overview, we do a little bit of a deep dive into certain innovative models that we've seen throughout the state. So examples of this are consortium-wide big ones, like smart ordinances and broadband roadmaps. We have some material on county-wide environmental impact reports, municipal fiber broadband networks, 5G deployment, councils of government, or work that councils of government are doing around broadband. We also have a section that provides, as I mentioned earlier, last October, we did a roundtable, a Getting Connected roundtable with local government leaders and internet service providers. We have a section in the resource guide that kind of summarizes all of this into a feedback from internet service providers section. We also have, as kind of an attachment or an appendix to the guide, a digital equity bill of rights, sample broadband access resolution, and a sample model policy to bring broadband in underserved communities. So a very, again, this guide, a really great starting point for jurisdictions wanting to do more or take some steps towards deploying broadband and taking advantage of investments in broadband. A lot of information. I'll pop the link into the chat right after this so people can click over and see the guide in full. And yeah, together with CETF Valley Vision, we're very excited to be rolling this guide out and making it available to everyone. And we look forward to all of you diving in and hopefully it being able to use it in your respective broadband work. Thank you, everyone. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Trish.
Thank you, Isa, for that really fantastic overview. And you can see how rich this resource is. And as Isa said, we hope that there'll be a lot in here for everybody to dig down in. We're available as a resource along with our partners. And we're going to be highlighting a couple of the case studies later in the conversation today. But really, I would like to bring Sunny back and have her introduce our two leaders from Southern California Councils of Government. I know we're running a little late on time. I just wanted to also thank Isa and Natalie Garcia from our staff for putting the whole event together. And of course, I always thank our dear Sunny and Micah for their incredible leadership and partnership. So I'm going to turn it right back over to you, Sunny.
Thank you, Trish. And at the California Emerging Technology Fund, the work that we're supposed to accomplish with the mission that was assigned to us by the California Public Utilities Commission of closing the digital divide in California is not possible without doing it with partners. You're going to hear from great leaders at the local level and regional level. And I'm excited to be able to have this privilege and opportunity to facilitate this next section with two executive leaders that are extraordinary in seeing the opportunity for the future and taking bold action. It's been my actual study to work with these two gentlemen for the better part of 2 decades. They are the executives of the Southern California Association of Governments and the San Diego Association of Governments. SCAG and SANDAG are 2 of the 4 metropolitan planning organizations in California. They MPOs are also very major players in the administration of transportation dollars. MPOs are recognized in federal government. In California, 85% of all transportation money flows directly to the local level, and then in this case through also the regional organizations. And so the opportunity to see an interface between transportation and mobility and broadband is part of the leading edge of policy and practice in California. I want to acknowledge that Komi Ajisi was director of Caltrans District 10 when I served at the state as Secretary of Business, Transportation, and Housing. And Asana Krata was the deputy director at SCAG at that time. Now San Diego has been able to lure Asana Krata to San Diego for Sandag, and Komi is now the executive of SCAG. Together, these two organizations are attempting what is not being done anywhere else in the country, which is to bring together 216 local governments, 7 counties, 209 cities, 60% of the state of California, and to take collective action on promoting broadband and getting all residences connected, all premises connected. So with that, let me just have them make sure they turn on their cameras, Komi Ajisi and Asana Krata, and I'm going to start with our dean, if you don't mind, Komi. We're going to go to Asan, and the question I have for both of you is, so what are the most important actions that local governments and regional governments can do to accelerate broadband deployment and adoption? Asan.
Thank you, Secretary McPeak. It's really an honor to work with you again. And I want to thank the California Emerging Technology Fund for putting the resources together with Micah from California Forward and Evan from Valley Vision. It's an honor to be with my colleague, Komi Ajisi. Just want you to know that Komi represents that little part of Southern California that we at Sandag trying to take over. The question is really, well, simple. It means a lot. So why is it important for partnerships between regional and local government when it comes to broadband? And I think the Secretary McPeak, you said it. There is no entity that I know of have the reach that Metropolitan Planning Organization has. Literally, Komi and I work for organizations that collaborate with over 200 cities, 7 counties, and represent 60% of the state population. And when you talk about that, and the good part about this is all these entities get together at least once a month, sometimes twice a month, and talk about issues. So I think giving the amount of entities involved in this, having MPOs and local government partner is a must, is absolutely a must. To help establish regional goals and objective broadband, identify infrastructure and policy needs, facilitate partnership among public and private sector. It is paramount that local and regional government work together. We actually at Sandag here established what we call the Southern California Digital Divide Task Force that include all stakeholders, public and private. We're also part with Komi, with SCAG, and the Southern California Digital Divide Coalition that include all kinds of stakeholders. But that work, for it to yield what we all want, is an access. When you say access to internet, it's access to opportunities, economic opportunities and otherwise. I'm so grateful for what you did, Secretary McPeak. Actually, 2 days ago, the California Transportation Commission allocated funding for State Route 67 here in San Diego. And this funding was to lay out conduits to reach 225 residents that otherwise won't have the connection. And, just a few months ago, we were talking about this as a big picture, and all of a sudden, now we have funding And we have partnership between county government, California Transportation Department, and the MPO. That I never heard of that. I never heard actually something in government get discussed and all of a sudden we're moving into implementation. We're laying out miles of conduit. That's an example where government can work together with nonprofit, private sector. And I think Comey would agree that if there is any entity that could facilitate that discussion, it will be the MPOs, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, not only because of who they represent, but also because they have the resources and the know-how to get streamlining of city processes. So long answer to an excellent question, Secretary McPhee.
And I have to just say that the vision that you brought immediately to doing State Route 67 came out of the work of literally Sandag took action in January 22nd, as I recall. And it is just a few months later to get to the California Transportation Commission, seeing this opportunity, embracing it. And of course, also, we want to acknowledge that the California Department of Transportation, led by Director Tog Samashakan and with Elizabeth Dewar as the broadband coordinator, the whole team at Caltrans, Comey used to be at headquarters as well, has really stepped up to be a partner with Sandag and Comey. So Comey, let me come to you in terms of managing just 197 counties and cities in your jurisdiction that Hassan is bent on taking over. What has made everybody come together in such a focused way at SCAG?
Well, first of all, Secretary McPhee, thank you for this panel, and I want to thank Valley Vision for this webinar. I feel like every time we have these conversations, and it's been progressive on broadband, we learn more, and as we learn more, we actually do better. And I think the example that Hassan mentioned, if I recall, it's barely 6 weeks ago that we were talking about this as a possibility, because this is a project that was ready to go to bid, and it's very instructive to see what information can do, and I think that's really the benefit of having these conversations. And it helps us to clarify further what the need is. I really appreciate Dr. Galpin's presentation because we have a little more data. We've always felt like in our region, 10% of our population are either underconnected or not connected in Southern California. Now we have more granular detail from the survey results that was presented earlier on, and it doesn't mean much if you can't relate it to real people. And so to your question about what's compelling about these conversations, I think the reason we got here is because of this progressive conversations we've been having. And as we were talking about this, we became very aware that as services begin to shift to the digital landscape, services in health, education, and economic work, there was a need to face up to the effect of the digital divide, which became very much more obvious because of COVID-19. And so being able to pull that together, and in our role as a regional agency, we're convener. We're conveners of local government. And so this is where local government comes together to try and solve problems that are bigger than each one of their unique jurisdictions. 191 cities, 6 counties in our case. These are sovereign entities that have enough to solve within their borders. And yet there is this larger issue of the digital divide that they have to face up to. And being able to define that for them in the way we've done over the various conversations has helped. One of the things that we do, there were 2 specific tools that I think maybe brought this to bear on clarity. We developed a sample resolution with Sandag, and that sample resolution was passed around. And I have to say, thanks to you, Secretary McPhee, for your role in guiding and curating the conversations we're having in our region. to help us be smarter about it. That sample resolution was able to inform everybody about what is possible. It was really calling everyone to action at the local level with a statement of intent on fixing the digital divide, now having this information about the effects of it. Along with the sample resolution, we also developed a policy paper, and I appreciate the presentation by ISA on the resource book. We did something smaller, on a smaller scale, by providing a policy paper for our local jurisdictions to begin to look at specific ways that they can address the barriers to fixing the digital divide. Things like planning and public works requirements that are onerous. Things like fees across our various jurisdictions. Again, if you're a provider, if you're a private provider, and you want to lay cable or fiber across multiple jurisdictions, you'll be faced with different fee structures and different permit requirements. And so one of the things we started talking about is a permit streamlining process. So these were compelling things that brought all of our local governments together and got them to begin to address this issue in concert with the intent that we want to be sure that we in fact fix the digital divide. I think one thing I'll say in closing is because I've heard many people allude to what might happen today because the governor is going to say something about broadband. I think it's amazing we're here talking about that potential today. A year ago, we were trying to figure out how do we address digital divide. So I have to say it's because of these conversations, this progressive, more informative conversations that we've had, that we've been able to now nail down what the actual needs are, such that we can address specific funding to those needs.
Thank you, Comey. I can't underscore more what I have observed with what you've done within the Southern California Association of Governments, what Hassan has done with the San Diego Association of Governments, of the consistent, persistent, focused leadership that keeps bringing people to the table. It is where there is such amazing traction of leadership for action. We think the governor is announcing a $7 billion investment by the state of California. We are obviously going to pursue federal dollars. And we had a question that I think is worth asking both of you right now. It came from Robert C. of USDA about whether or not the MPOs, SCAG, SANDAG, are willing to be the recipients directly of federal dollars or even state dollars with the planning you're doing because of the sort of immense comprehensive approach. What would each of you say to that? Just as a sort of a quick response.
I can speak for Comey. We're always ready to receive money from anybody. We're like, but honestly, I hope that's the case. I mean, I think Comey and I were having a discussion with the governor's office about a different topic. And our message to the governor's office, we're in the front line. Nobody has the reach we do. We can partner with the state in a big way. The state is a big place. It's not our desire to say, oh my God, we got money and it's part of the budget. It's our desire to actually put it out there, put it to use. And, we had programs both at SANDAG, and I'm sure they have at SCAG, where we have a grant program to incentivize local governments to do the right thing. I mean, it's about doing the right thing. Look, this has been a very difficult 14 months for all of us. I think COVID-19 tested us to the max. But if there's anything good out of it, Secretary McPeak, is actually it allowed us to have this discussion we're having right now. And how we move forward is going to judge us as a society, as a state, as a region. So I would welcome any funding, state and federal, and not to keep the funding or put it in the books, but to put it out there to work. Because this is like we said in the beginning, this topic, and Comey is absolutely right, this topic, which is really got to the earnest, and thanks to you, Secretary McPeak, and to your entity, this topic is a topic that I would relate to. If you truly want to get to social justice and social equity, without addressing the digital divide, you cannot have a social equity and social justice. Whether when you put a brand, or people say, well, you know, there is ways to access internet. Yeah, there is ways, but sometimes too expensive for many to reach, especially for low-income minorities. So yes, the answer is I won't speak for comment, but I'm sure we're the same. Yeah, we'll accept money, federal and state, just simply because we want to put it out to work.
Great. Comey.
Well, I would tend to agree that we'll accept the money as long as it's coming to our region. We have structures in place for moving money through. This is not money that's going to be in the SCAG's budget. In fact, if you take a look at our budget, you'll notice that better than 50% of our budget is passed through to our various local jurisdictions. I think what the MPOs can do more than just receiving the money, what we can do best is to bring folks together to objectively then assign the money to the right projects and to be sure that we're solving the worst needs first.
And
Secretary, if I just, when you were a secretary, you really started this great idea that mobility as a service, mobility as a company. And if you recall, you started a program called the Blueprint. And you got us some funding to MPOs. And when we start putting this out at the time, my boss, Mark Pisano, we had like money for 5 cities and we ended up with 100 cities want to do this. This is no difference. I think if MPOs, like Comey said, we have the know-how to pass the money through. If we do this right, I think local cities will become a willing participant and service providers will become interested in the streamlining that happens. So I hope the funding comes our way so we can move forward and do this right.
I would underscore that based on what I both have seen recently, know historically. So I thank Robert for bringing that question. So now let me also invite you to in addressing, I'm going to combine sort of 2 concepts for you to discuss. I'm aware, because we are working so closely together, that each of you are doing very comprehensive maps of needs and opportunities. And that is intended to engage in conversations with the internet service providers and with local governments when those dollars are available. Can you both talk about how best to engage local governments in thinking about what they can do, and then how you plan to partner with the internet service providers using the mapping you are doing? Who wants to go first?
The small MPO will go first. Comey, that's Comey. Yeah.
I was holding back for the dean to go first. You know, I think one of the things that we learned in the process is how data is critical. Before a year ago, when we were talking about this, there was this notion that just about every census tract in our region had broadband access available to them. When you dig deeper in the data, you find out that yes, there might be a broadband in one portion of that census tract, and so the entire census tract is labeled as. So it was really important for us to dig deeper into the information that is out there, and coming to find out that in fact our data was expressed in those maps such that we could see very clearly areas of deficit, of tremendous deficit. That has helped in having conversations about where the likely needs are. Really, the intent of the maps was to have that conversation about where would you spend resources. No, understand that resources are going to be tight, and if they come, where would you put them to be sure that you're getting the biggest bang for the buck? I think the other aspect of the data, because the data we got from the FCC and the CPUC obviously are not enough, was to begin to cross-tabulate the data we have from those sources with data that we were getting from education in terms of school kids that were either classified under the poverty metric with school lunches, for example, cross-tabulating that data with healthcare in terms of folks that were not able to access healthcare because they didn't have the right connection. Then you get a little finer data on exactly where the need is. So that would, again, to your question, that data has been very helpful to then be able to prioritize where the fixes need to be, not only in terms of where there is no connection, but even where the connection is not up to par. As the governor's executive order has indicated that the intent is to get to a higher speed at 100 megabits, we now have a whole different perspective on how what the problem is in terms of fixing the digital divide, and this data is very helpful for that.
And then go ahead, Hassan.
No, the only thing I agree with everything Komi said, and I will add is, you know, in the era of the Internet of Everything and artificial intelligence and big data, I think both at SCAG and here at SANDAG, we are probably the only entities that's gonna put open data and big data out to use. Right now, we actually have the capability of mapping out not only where the gaps are, but overlaying that with social income data that could make it very clear to all of us where we need to put to achieve not only the executive order, but to achieve some basic things that we've been missing before. So your question is a great one, simply because without the data, we really couldn't start. And now we have the data and the capability to map it and show it. And that would make it actually much easier for the service providers to kind of say, okay, and this is where I need to invest, or this is where I need to partner with government. So I think the data question is, like Komi said, is paramount important to this discussion.
So I want you both to address this, because with that data, you also have an approach and a philosophy of working with the internet service providers. We have talked a lot about step up or step aside. Can you just comment on that step in the future of determining what the ISPs are willing to do and where you might have to have the public sector step in and actually build?
Go ahead, Komi, and I'll follow.
Well, I know that Hassan is probably further, SANDAG's further along with their conversations with the ISPs than we are. We've started talking to them. We actually sent a survey out to them just to begin to address some commonalities, understanding very clearly that this is a competitive issue of competition between various private entities, and understanding that there are issues of privacy in terms of data and proprietary information. So we're trying to step through that process right now to understand really where the exact needs are that the ISPs are looking for. Now, one thing I would say that we had done prior to all of this, about a year, maybe 18 months ago, we actually were doing a study on how we could use private equity to leverage ISP capacities in areas that they may not feel was profitable for them to invest in, which again coincides with these areas that we think are underserved, and how we could. And as we were doing that, I think we ran into the same issues of the need for public funds. So for the ISPs, what we're offering here is there will be public investment. To have public investment, there has to be a collateral partnership from them to, one, provide more information about what the service outlet network is from their perspective, but also to cooperate with us on making sure that we're addressing the worst needs first.
And just to add, we must have that collaborative relationship between government and service providers. And I believe service providers would want to see the streamlining and the permitting processes improved, and that is where definitely could help. But this will also require creating new partnerships, structures and agreements such as RFI, P3, public-private partnership, to attract and incentivize the providers to be a partner. I think here in San Diego, we actually have the private sector ready to partner once we outline. This is not about requiring you to do something. This is about working together, because if you don't have the collaborative way, I mean, government could streamline processes, but if the private sector is not there, we're not going to get anywhere, and vice versa. And so I believe the service provider, at least in San Diego here, and we started working with them, and we're going to create those partnership structures and agreements such as RFI and P3s to move forward. But by far, I was really encouraged, very encouraged by the meetings that we have with the service provider and their ability and also their willingness to put their own resources to make sure we move this forward.
Thank you so much. Asana Krata, Comia GC. I hope everybody understands why it is such a privilege to work with both of you as true chief executives willing to take bold action. And it is a privilege for the California Emerging Technology Fund to be an extension of your teams. I think that that is how we're now acting and working seamlessly with SCAG and Sandag. Again, thank you. And I'll turn this back to Valley Vision.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's always just a great honor and pleasure to be working with Komeh and Hassan and the leadership. We've included your materials in the guide because it's really groundbreaking in the broader vision to connect everybody, but also provide the tools and resources for local government and the leadership to get ourselves investment ready is just a gold standard. So we're so honored to have you with us, and I just thank you again. And now we want to shift to more of the city and county case studies and examples, and we're going to start with a case study from El Dorado County. And what you're really going to see is what it takes for to be involved in the long game. And I'd like to introduce Aaron Magezi, who's the Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for El Dorado County. Aaron has only been in El Dorado County for a few months, but he has more than 20 years of experience with government efforts, transit, health, energy, infrastructure, agriculture, all the things that are impacted and affected by connectivity and broadband. So it's my pleasure to introduce Aaron, and he's going to give us a walkthrough on all the work that occurred over the past several years and where the county is now, which is really exciting. So Aaron, please join us now.
Right. Thank you very much, Trish. That was quite an introduction. I first of all want to recognize and give appreciation to Valley Vision for giving us the opportunity, the County of El Dorado, to be here and to present before you our ongoing efforts and approach towards broadband. Komeh and Hassan, that was really interesting and really enjoyable just listening to your interaction, and everybody else as well. So I want to clarify briefly. I've been with the county now 2 months, and this effort towards broadband connectivity has been an ongoing one, and there's been involvement at the highest level and with both internal and external stakeholders, who I'll touch on. If we could have the next slide, please. So the leadership here at the county is, of course, our board of supervisors. There are 5 districts. Those are the board members: John Heidel, George Turnbull, Wendy Thomas, Lori Paulin, and Sue Novosel, and of course our CAO, Dawn Ashton. They are the leadership, and they provide the strategic guidance and have enabled and created the environment that has enabled us to move forward in the pursuit of connectivity in the county. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier on, this effort has been ongoing. It started or kicked off in 2015, and if you look at the if you look at that timeline, we expect it to be concluded sometime thereabout in 2026. So that's about a decade. This is a long game. This effort is one that requires tremendous planning and alignment and strategic planning as well. So the county's approach was it took on on the guidance of the board, it took on a consultant. There was an RFP. We went out proactively for grants, or EDA grants. We had engaged the consultant to do some feasibility studies. The consultant, who's an amazing consultant, Diane Cruz with Neo Connect, and internally, Kyle Kimballman, who is with our Economic and Development Department, went out for this technical assistance grant. We did a needs assessment, thank you. And then 2016 through to 2019 with the RFP, internally a group was established, which was the technical advisory group. And then there's also a board ad hoc committee. This committee is next slide, please. This committee includes the 2 board members and the CAO, and then the technical advisory group includes internal experts, Neo Connect, and of course, representatives from CEO's office. Community outreach, the business community, broadband, as you're aware, touches on public safety, health, education. We are a rural county, and you know, we do have a significant portion of the county that is both underserved and unserved. What happened is we needed this feasibility study to give, you know, the board a real perspective in terms of what the needs were. One of the guidance that we have is the dig once policies impact to the public, and we wanted to. We go next slide, please. Sorry. We wanted to basically, at the conclusion of this feasibility study, come out with a plan and an approach. So the guidance is we can't, we more strategically placed to take on a smaller, identify high priority areas, and then seek out, actively seek out investors and partners and look for grant opportunities, as funding is one of the constraints for broadband. You could go to the next slide, please. So bringing us almost to the present, through July 2020 and September 2020, the county applied for an EDA grant. And we, as with most grants, had a couple of rounds of questions around the design, engineering, and environmental issues. We addressed, and it's an ongoing effort, but we addressed these concerns through both the consultant with Neo Connect and internally our experts and the economic and development leadership as well. Come November 2020, we received a conditional grant from the EDA to the tune of about, just under 4 million with a 10% match from the county. For a total amount of 4.2 million. There are still some conditions around soil, ARC, digs, and NEPA environmental results that are being addressed. You could go next slide, please. To the present, we continue to engage and work with our consultant to address all the outstanding needs of the EDA grant. We are confident, optimistically confident, that we will secure the award, and there's ongoing, or will be ongoing, environmental work and surveys that will be done. Next slide, please. So what does the future look like? We will, and we do want to get federal monies and grants for rural and tribal populations. There are conditions around qualifying and match requirements, which will have to be addressed. We keep an eye out, and we're leveraging our consultant to give us some indication of what these opportunities will look like. The state of California has launched the Broadband for All plan, and this captures many of the needs identified by our consultant. But there, at this point in time, there was no available funding, or at least not yet. We continue to work, with an eye out for those kind of fundings, and are also interested in engaging in P3 opportunities with our consultant, public-private partnerships that would help us leverage that. Internally, we have our ad hoc committee meetings, which meet on a regular cadence, and we communicate around messaging that we're getting from the state level and the nation level on opportunities for broadband. And we're seeing a lot of these recently that are coming through. You could move on to the next slide, please. So one of these has been the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, funds for broadband. We are proactively exploring how we can use these funds for broadband. Our county leadership is fully committed to and engaged in ongoing efforts, including the ad hoc committee and the TAG team, and of course our economic development leadership and the consultant. We actually have a meeting on the books for about 2 weeks out, in which we can, discuss how we will approach the ARPA funding. Next slide, please. So collaboration has been mentioned a lot. We are highly collaborative internally and externally. Our approach is strategic, and we want to leverage our current assets and discuss how we can use some of these ARPA funds towards broadband. We want to, for example, discuss how much of these funds we can leverage, and what would be the best use, and how would we identify specific projects and locations within the county. There are very specific guidelines in the and criteria around upload and download speeds. And these funds need to be obligated by December 2024 and spent by December 2026. So there is a time sensitivity around our operations. And so that seems a kind of look behind and just a quick overview of broadband at the county where we were, what efforts have taken, and how and where we are now. I can't stress enough the need for broadband within the county, both for education, public safety, public health, and of course, addressing other issues, social issues around broadband and the opportunities it provides. The COVID pandemic has really highlighted the challenges that around connectivity, with telework, teleschool, telemedicine, and it's impacted very adversely those who are on the other side of the spectrum of the economic divide. And I think the federal government and at the national level and the state level has really come forward. There's funding, and we see funding opportunities coming through, and we just need to invest the time and resources to be able to identify how best we can leverage those funds and possibly scale up internally at a state level. So that I hope is pretty rushed, but it's just an overview. And again, I recognize the leadership that we have here at the county, the experts, the consultants who we've engaged, because it is a highly specialized area. And some counties, most counties will find that broadband just hasn't been an area that they've been working on recently. It's infrastructure, but it's also a very high it's a very high need area that we need to be able to get deployed. So I look forward to trying to address any other questions, you may have on that presentation.
Thank you so much, Aaron. That's a fantastic overview. I know we don't have a lot of time, and we're going to have more opportunities and more events to drill down deeper, but you just gave a really concise timeline of all the things that happened. And I want to say we'd been working in the region since 2009 and getting to the rural areas, especially with line of sight issues with forest and dispersed households, cracking the case of how to get the funding and where to target. I think that you all have done an incredible job. And with the resource guide has links to your website, which show the various financial feasibility studies and things like that. And now that you're in the stage to getting to implementation, it is really a testament to all of the hard work and the continuing efforts that you'll make. And we're very pleased. You might have seen in the chat that the governor announced today officially in his May revise that there's going to be $7 billion coming for middle mile access and for transportation related projects. So that will really help, especially areas like El Dorado County, and connect our unserved and underserved households and provide more opportunities for local government. So I think the message to Aaron is that we have to be ready. We have to know where the projects are, what the mechanisms are that we're going to use to invest and engage our providers. So I thank you again for that great overview. And we'll go to Jordan now from City of San Jose to show an urban case study. And San Jose has been a leader in working with providers. And Jordan is the Chief Innovation Officer for the City of San Jose. They work in partnership with CETF on a lot of digital inclusion work, but Jordan has a great deal of public and private sector experience, including in digital health deployment and startups and ventures. So it's fantastic representation or representative of kind of the culture of Silicon Valley and the leadership of San Jose. And Jordan, I note in your bio also was a diplomat, which I'm sure serves you very well in all of what you must navigate in your role to connect the city. And we're really interested to learn more about the efforts that you've had and some of the real on the ground challenges and opportunities, how we get ready. And there's been a lot of talk about 5G deployment, and we don't think people necessarily really understand what it takes to do that. So really eager to hear your presentation now. So I'm happy to welcome you, Jordan. Thank you.
Thank you, Trish. So thank you very much for the kind introduction. I know we have a couple of minutes here. So, the purpose of this is really to demonstrate to y'all a unique public-private partnership opportunity that combines sort of the three key sectors here of obviously the public sector and its investment, the private sector when it comes to its rollout of emerging technology, but then also thinking about bringing in not-for-profits. And so this is a very interesting trifecta approach of deploying emerging technologies such as 5G, but also creating net positive impact for our communities. So with that being said, what I'd like to talk about today is one of our flagship projects here, our San Jose Digital Inclusion Fund that we have really launched and still very much so in the process of scaling in partnership with CETF. And so really thanks CETF for all your tremendous leadership and support here. Next slide, please. So just quick background on San Jose for those who haven't been here. We are 1 million residents. We are the 10th largest city in the US. We are very interesting in the fact that we're incredibly diverse as a population with both foreign born as well as heavy representation of communities of color. And at the same time, our mayor is incredibly bold in putting his foot down in solving both the homework gap as well as the broader digital divide. And we took advantage of the pandemic to really try to bring as much connectivity to our residents as possible. So by the end of 2022, we have the bold plan of attempting to connect up to 300,000 residents to free community-based Wi-Fi. Next slide. And so when we thought about internet and the digital divide and the right to have access to it, we realized, and this, really want to credit my predecessor, Shireen Santosham, as well as CETF and other members from the city manager's office and library, in really digging deep and understanding what is our digital divide first, and why does the problem exist? And so first understanding what is the problem, we realized that we had about 95,000, close to 95,000 residents that lacked broadband access to internet. We also realized that digital skills is a significant problem. And so when you think about digital literacy, this was something that was incredibly highlighted to us during our survey done. And then obviously communities of color. And I think this is further reiterated during a lot of the other presentations by the previous panelists as well. Next slide. And when you think about kind of what are, digging a little bit deeper, what are some of the principles that cause these issues? Well, one of the biggest issue has to do with cost. And most recently, there was another survey done here in California that said 68% of Californians who experience the digital divide cite cost as the primary issue. And so, whether it's service or device, this is a significant issue for us to be able to tackle. And so when we look at cost, putting my private sector hat on, I look at it at two factors. One is actually just sheer economics and unfortunately price discrimination. But the second part is the psychology of it. And what is the value to me, both for the service costs as well as device costs as a low income family member deciding and weighing your budgets. Next slide, please. And so when we also, once again, realize that, how significant our digital divide is, we obviously know a significant amount of it is on the east side. We recognize that a lot of the communities of color are harder to reach than normal. And so we really needed to figure out a way with the Digital Inclusion Fund when it came together of how do we reach these marginalized communities that are also unconnected. And this became even more important for us as we considered the pandemic when everything shifted virtually. But guess what? Our customers, our residents are not virtual. So next slide. And so how we came together with the Digital Inclusion Fund is quite elegant, and it sounds a lot more complicated than it really is, so I'll break it down for you. So first of all, we accelerate the 5G deployments of small cells, and those both expand as well as densify the 5G networks. Now, if you accelerate the permits, that creates economic gains because companies can more quickly start to realize revenues on those investments of assets. And so by accelerating those permits, we increase revenue opportunities, which then create economic gains that flow back into our community, specifically through the Digital Inclusion Fund. And so we have roughly about 14 million dedicated from the telcos that is planned on an annual basis based off of permitting revenues. And then we have another 10 million that we expect from donations, of which we've exceeded over close to almost 2.5 million in donations already in the first year and a half since launching the fund. In total, we have a $24 million digital inclusion fund. Like we said, we can't do it without CETF. And that's how the funding structure works. Separately, once we have the funds, we issue grants. So last year we issued 23 grants to 23 community-based organizations as partners to address the three-legged stool problem. And that's device access, connectivity, digital literacy. But I want to emphasize that the fundamental issues that we're trying to solve for here is ensuring long-term sustainable access of, most importantly, providing digital literacy proficiency and be able to document that clearly. And so that's how we think we can close the digital divide sustainably, because we've done a ton of investments, as you've seen from the connectivity piece with what the mayor is putting forth with connecting up to 300,000 residents. We understand there's a device need issue and that we've been trying to plug for that. And we have I'll talk a little bit of that later. But the real importance here of the Digital Inclusion Fund is solving for the digital literacy piece. Next slide, please. And so, as I mentioned about the device, it's as we build the platforms, the steps to achieving bridging the digital divide, it's connectivity, and then we realize it's devices. And so when the pandemic hit, we did a massive shift of understanding, of surveying what is the actual need on the ground. And we realized device access is one of the biggest detriments to us to be able to bridge the digital divide. I would say, look, we start out with over 67,000 students here in San Jose that were unconnected because they did not have access to a smartphone as well, or a workable device, specifically a laptop or tablet for school. And we brought that down to less than 10%. That was in partnership with the SCOE, the county Santa Clara County of Education, the school districts, the library, as well as our philanthropic partners and CETF. Next slide. And so what I wanted to talk a little bit about here is, as I mentioned about the Digital Inclusion Fund, I talked about our investment in connectivity. I talked about our investment in digital literacy. And I talked a little bit about that, the issue with devices. We're constantly innovating here and rethinking the business problem, this business model problem that we often face here in social impact. And so when it came to devices, just for a quick case study, what we realized was there was significant, we quickly pivoted, as I mentioned, and we figure out a way to innovate in terms of providing a more sustainable access to devices. We realized the current model was not sustainable. It was inconsistent in how devices came to us. And more importantly, it was costly because every device that came that was a refurbished device costed us roughly about $250. And you can go to the next slide. So every device costed us about $150 to $250 to get refurbished. And by the time that it went to the user's hands, you can't help but wonder, why didn't we just buy folks a new device? And so, an old device takes about 6 to 18 weeks, even with the supply chain gaps. It was a significant issue that we had to solve for. Next slide. So I'm going to rush through this a little bit since I know we're short on time. We surveyed the market obviously, of several device partners that were doing refurbished services. Next slide. And then in the end, we arrived at an opportunity where we partnered with Revivin, which is a B Corp startup. And we were able to line up also a philanthropic partner that was enabling us to supplement some of their device refurbishment in order for us to bring devices sustainably to the community. And so when you think about the Digital Inclusion Fund, we invest in digital literacy. We invest in solving a three-legged stool, but when you break down each of the leg of the stool, you really have to understand where your strengths are, where are there opportunities for us to innovate on. And in this case, it was the device pilot that we launched. Next slide. And so we have several other opportunities coming. As I mentioned, we have several other self projects that are in the process of being launched. One of them is trying to leverage emerging technology, specifically in the blockchain space, to understand how we can address the difficult willingness to pay problem for our low-income residents. Another issue is looking at solving, providing additional support from a IT and tech support perspective to ensure that our residents who are connected do not fall back into the digital divide. And so we're constantly innovating here. We're constantly trying to create new ways to address new hurdles that we face. But once again, we're here to connect all our residents to the extent possible and ensure that all folks have equal access and are connected to broadband internet and a workable device, and they have a safe and prosperous experience using the internet. Thanks.
Thank you, Jordan. I know you compressed a lot of important information for us. And like I said, we're going to keep this conversation going in our region with the Sacramento Coalition for Digital Inclusion. We're just at the front end of this process, so we have a lot to learn from you. And I think what the city's done of showing the connectivity of all the pieces and generating a funding source for the digital equity work through the partnership and the efforts that you have with the permitting and other things is really an important model that other people can learn from. And the issue with devices, we're facing that as well. There's the new emergency broadband benefit program that's coming from, it's rolling out today through the FCC with providers, but a lot of the providers aren't doing devices. So I think your approach is also going to show a lot of us how to weave these pieces together. So we're going to keep looking to you and your team so we understand better how to deploy across the state and learn from you. And thank you again for your entrepreneurial, innovative approaches and your partnership with all of us. I know we are running a little behind and we've had such rich material. I've been tracking the questions, and maybe we were going to have a little Q&A panel, but I think what we might do is shift to Elizabeth Duher, who's the Caltrans broadband leader. And Kyle Zimbelman is with us today, also from El Dorado County But I think what we'll do is we'll have Elizabeth come on, and then we'll all talk together, because the connectivity issues through these local projects and the strategic broadband corridors will show some connectivity issues too. So thank you so much, Jordan. We'll watch the chat, and we'll see about questions also. I really appreciate your presentation. So now I'd like to bring up Elizabeth Dewar, who is the Broadband Facilities Coordinator for Caltrans, and she is leading incredible work across the state and supports the California Broadband Council. And we have been working in partnership with Caltrans through the network of regional consortia on strategic broadband corridors with our councils of government and MPO. So it's my pleasure to introduce Elizabeth today.
Thank you so much, Trish. Thank you for the invitation to be here today. And as you announced earlier, and as we've been seeing in the chat, it's extremely exciting news for the release of the May budget revise, and to hear the $7 billion investment of the infrastructure expansion for broadband and for broadband access. So I couldn't start without reiterating and mentioning that. I know we're short on time, so I as well am going to try and cover some points really quickly, and happy to answer any questions that may come into the chat as well. So I think, we've been talking a whole lot today about partnerships and expansion of broadband. It's been discussed how there really is a need for leadership, investment, and innovative solutions. We're familiar with the governor's executive order from last year and the state broadband action plan that the California Broadband Council developed and will continue to update on an annual basis as a living document. I think this is important to highlight, because this is the guidance, and this is how states are working together for broadband expansion. So the executive order gives us that direction to coordinate and collaborate more intentionally to provide access for high quality broadband services for all Californians. Many of the departments and agencies throughout the state government oversee different portions of broadband deployment and adoption. Caltrans has the responsibility to deploy the fiber and fiber conduit along the state highway system in an efficient and equitable manner. And that's exactly what we're working on now, is to deploy a conduit system, the middle mile, along our state highway right-of-way. I think, as was shared earlier today as well, the guidelines, and ISA covered a lot about Dig Smart, and you heard from El Dorado. It's an essential tool in our toolkit to be able to construct this work as quickly as possible. I think taking from what many of the speakers have shared today, the importance of the funding, but not just getting that funding, but actually spending that funding and putting it to good use and seeing the benefits of that funding as efficiently and quickly as possible. So certainly the department itself is working on that, and the Broadband Action Plan calls for the implementation of a Dig Smart policy to install conduit as part of our transportation projects, particularly along our strategic corridors, as an incentive for service build-outs for underconnected and unconnected communities. So with that, the Dig Smart policies have been shared today that a lot of the local area governments have been working on. It's no different for Caltrans. We ourselves are working on our Dig Smart policy. And again, it's to provide the opportunity for a lower cost, capital cost of construction for the infrastructure deployment. It will help to minimize the disruptions that are caused by ongoing and duplicative construction, and to incentivize, again, the expeditious investment in our communities. And so to that end, Caltrans has been working on our efforts over the last few years, quite a few years. I will say that in particular for my position, this was established at the early part of last year. And so it's very exciting that while Caltrans has been working on broadband efforts, we certainly have dedicated resources to this, starting with my position as the broadband facilities coordinator. We also have shared in the past our efforts to work to streamline broadband expansion through the facilitation of standalone projects, through encroachment permitting on our state highway right-of-way, as well as partnerships opportunities for service providers to join with Caltrans on our transportation projects in areas where the service providers are trying to reach the communities and Caltrans is already out there. We would love to have the service providers join us. You heard today a lot about the need for streamlining of the permitting process. And that is something that Caltrans as well continues to work on, trying to make this process quicker. I'd like to share just a little bit of information in terms of what Caltrans has for our permitting requirements and the data and the performance that we've been meeting. So at this point, we have close to 95% of our permits that we can issue within 30 days. We're striving for those remaining 5% of permits. Clearly those are the more complicated permits that we do need to ensure, a quality review and that the work is performed without, say, damaging the environment or impacting other parts of the state. But it's really important to us that we continue these improvements on the permitting and work with service providers for access to our right-of-way. We also hold outreach meetings twice a year with our service providers and all stakeholders to try and get the message out about what we're working on, to connect them with myself and others within the department for help on how Caltrans can work with you and how you can work with Caltrans. And this information is on our broadband website that is shown on your screen right now. So please take some time to visit that website. You'll see a lot of information there. It has my contact information. It has contact information for local broadband coordinators in each of our 12 districts, which I think is, we heard today from SCAG and SANDAG that the local partnerships are critical for the implementation of these efforts. And so I also would like to, thank Sunny for recognizing Caltrans to work with SANDAG and others on the State Route 67 project. I think it's critical, again, that I emphasize the need for our local partnerships, and that always starts at our district level. And so, with the support of our Caltrans District Director in District 11, San Diego, Gustavo Delardo, as well as the Deputy District Director, Chris Schmidt. Everybody's been working really hard with SANDAG and SCAG, and they are great partners with us. And so it really is a highlight accomplishment that we can talk about this project moving forward. This is our user guide that you can find on our webpage. And I just wanted to share with you that, for detailed information, there is, it may be found on our website. And in addition to our user guide, along with, Valley Vision and CETF and California Forward and their guidance today, Caltrans has guidance as well for working with the state. So between our guidance and our contacts, please visit the website and also feel free to reach out to me. The last thing that I'll highlight today is that I think we do have a lot of opportunities moving forward. Again, we want to look at the opportunities that Caltrans has to install conduit on our transportation projects for future use for the broadband expansion. We want to continue to work and engage with our regional broadband consortia. I appreciate all of the outreach that we have had with the with the Broadband Consortia and their participation in the Caltrans meetings, and trying to bring Caltrans as well as local agencies together with the service providers so that we can all work as a team, understand each other's challenges, but recognize that we do have the same vision and goal. And so that, you know, we can get through these challenges, and working on them and talking about them and communicating is the only way to move forward as quickly as possible. And so lastly, we, you know, the May budget revise that was shared, the $7 billion, as well as all of the efforts, you know, talked about with Caltrans. We are that middle mile, that stability, that broadband backbone infrastructure that we hope to have on the state right of way for the service providers to be able to access, to bring out to the communities. So again, I think I want to emphasize, it really is critical that we continue to talk with the service providers, and I appreciate Trish's and Sunny's help in talking to the service providers and connecting them with us. And we do want to continue to send that message. Again, this is my contact information for anybody who will see this video at a later date, but it is on our website, so you can email or contact me directly. And I certainly would be happy to help to connect you with our districts for any local conversations. And if there's any time for questions, I'm happy to answer those as well.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for that really wonderful overview. And Sunny mentioned something in the chat about how you've been so instrumental in clearing the backlog of all the applications going through, which really is just so appreciated. And I know the work that you're doing across the districts to help find consistency and really implement these policies is just, we're just so grateful for all the work that you've accomplished in the last year or two. And I do encourage everybody, please, to be thinking about contacting Elizabeth and connecting with the leads in your district, because through the Broadband Corridors Project, we have transportation routes that are identified that we've worked on with Caltrans and the local COGS and our regional consortia. So we have project areas identified around which we would like to prioritize the Dig Once policy. So really excited can't emphasize how important the middle mile work is with the transportation corridor. So thank you so much again to all of our panelists. It's a rich conversation. There's so much here. I'm sorry we haven't had more time. As I mentioned, we'll continue to these conversations, and we'll get the materials out to everybody. And I do want to say that we have a few more events coming up. We'll be posting those and letting everybody know. And we will continue working with California Emerging Technology Fund and California Forward. We have the Broadband for All working group, and we would love to have all of you join us on that as we continue to work with state agencies of the legislature, the providers, and all the partners that we've talked about today. And we will be continuing to work on the legislative efforts. I want to thank our local Assembly Member Aguiar Curry and all the other legislative leaders who are continuing to put their heart and soul into connecting all of us. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to ask Sunny McPee to close for us. And thank you again, Sunny, for your partnership.
Thank you very much, Trish, and thank you again to you, to Isa, to Evan, to all of Valley Vision for bringing together this webinar. All of our panelists were great. We could go on forever. I think what I want to just acknowledge is the amazing amount of leadership that is at the local level throughout California to be true allies to the state and to get California positioned to really take advantage of all the federal funds that are going to be available, we expect, in the future. There is no substitute for leadership. There is no substitute for the hard work that you just heard compressed into literally 2 hours. It is an amazing amount by hundreds and hundreds of people throughout the state, and we want to invite even more of our local officials at the city, county, and regional level to be the partners to get broadband deployed everywhere high-speed internet access for every Californian and to get everyone online. So thank you back to you. I always really appreciate your collaboration, your partnership, and your tolerance of the challenges that we all endure, and then you continue to push us forward. Thank you, Trish Kelly. Thank you, Valley Vision.
Well, it's our pleasure to be following in the lead and side by side. And I do want to thank Sunny. She funded us in 2009 to convene a roundtable on whether or not broadband was an issue. So it is the long game, as we like to say in the famous words of other notable leaders, the arc bends toward justice in the long term. So I also want to note and thank you, our leaders from the California Broadband Council who commented in the chat. We're really looking forward to working with you on the council to help implement the Broadband for All plan. And I do have one other note. Diane Cruz from El Dorado County was not able to be with us. She's been the consultant, but we're going to try to also bring more information to you as fantastic resources. So I think that's it. Please send us your questions and we'll try to connect you with any information, and we will continue to provide information and really look forward to working with everyone on our exciting new $7 billion. We have a way to spend it, right?
We do. Everybody just laid out the plan, so bring it on.
Okay. Well, thank you so much again to our wonderful panelists and speakers and leaders. So thank you again, and we'll talk to everybody very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.